So, if you've paid literally any attention to the business world lately, you've probably been completely bombarded by the hype around AI agents.
Oh, it is inescapable right now, like everywhere you look.
Right. Every software vendor out there is promising autonomous AI that's just going to magically revolutionize human resources overnight. The pitch is basically that you just plug in this autonomous agent, you step back, and it runs your hiring, your onboarding, your workforce planning completely friction-free.
Yeah, that's the utopian sales pitch anyway.
Exactly. But what if all of that is basically just an overpriced, over-engineered illusion? That is our mission for today's deep dive. We are going to cut right through that vendor marketing.
And to do that, we're pulling from this fascinating piece of research by Dr. Jonathan H. Westover. It's titled Workflows versus Agents, Choosing the Right HR AI Architecture.
Yeah, and the stats in this piece are just wild. I mean, he points out that 65% of large organizations, so companies with over 10,000 employees, they claim to have deployed or are actively piloting AI agents in HR.
But then you audit them, you look under the hood, and fewer than 15% actually have genuine agents.
So wait, what are the other 85% actually paying for?
They are paying for standard rigid workflows that have been sprinkled with like a tiny bit of AI, rebranded as autonomous agents, and then sold at wildly inflated enterprise prices.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can really understand why so many smart, well-resourced companies are falling for this illusion, we need to establish the actual mechanics of these technologies.
Right.
Dr. Westover categorizes this into three distinct tiers, right? Starting with AI tasks.
Let's start right at the base layer, yeah. And the AI task.
Yep.
This is a single-turn, stateless interaction. And stateless basically just means the AI has amnesia. It doesn't remember the interaction 10 seconds after it happens.
Like asking an AI to summarize a candidate's CV.
Precisely. The AI reads it, generates a summary, and immediately forgets it ever existed.
Mm.
And because it's so simple, it costs almost nothing. We're talking fractions of a penny per execution.
Wow, so practically free.
Practically free. But things get more complex and obviously more expensive when we move up one tier to the workflow. A workflow chains multiple tasks together.
Right.
So think of like a new hire onboarding process. First, extract data from the offer letter. Second, use that data to create IT accounts. Third, generate a welcome packet. The AI might do the data extraction, but human engineers totally own the decision tree.
Okay, so the sequence of events is strictly locked in. I find analogies really help here. So using a workflow is kind of like a train on a fixed track. It's reliable, it's predictable, it gets you to the station exactly how you planned.
That is a great way to visualize it. The humans own the tracks. Costs go up a bit because you're chaining steps,
Yeah.
usually somewhere between 5 and 30 cents per execution.
Yeah.
But it is highly predictable.
Which brings us to the most hyped tier, right, the agent.
Right. In an agentic system, you don't provide a track. You provide a goal. To stick with your analogy, an agent is like an autonomous off-road vehicle.
Oh boy.
You give it a destination, and it will dynamically determine its own path to get there, using whatever context and digital tools it has. It owns its own decision tree.
Right, but because it's off-roading, it might just drive straight through someone's living room to get to the destination.
I mean, honestly, yes. It's incredibly sophisticated. It might check a database, decide to email a candidate, see they didn't open it, switch to texting them, and then escalate a flag to a manager all on its own.
That sounds amazing, but also terrifying.
It is. Giving the AI the power to make its own decisions is incredibly messy, and more importantly, it's incredibly expensive, which really highlights the core tension of the research here.
Because if this off-road agent approach is that unpredictable and just vastly over-engineered for basic tasks, why is every single HR department rushing out to buy them?
Well, it comes down to a mix of peer pressure and vendor economics. The academics actually call the peer pressure element institutional isomorphism.
Institutional isomorphism. I'm going to need you to translate that into English for me.
Fair enough. It's essentially the academic term for corporate FOMO. It describes when organizations adopt a new tech just because their competitors are doing it. It's totally divorced from any actual performance benefits.
Oh, so you go to an HR tech summit, everyone is talking about agents, and leadership demands one just so they can brag about it in a shareholder report.
Exactly. You don't want to be left behind. And the software vendors building these tools, they know this. They know the difference between a workflow and an agent.
They have to know they're selling a train on a track and calling it an off-road vehicle.
Oh, they are fully aware.
Yeah.
But the financial incentives to blur those lines are perverse. If a vendor sells a solid, workflow-based screening system, The standard enterprise rate might be, $2 to $5 per applicant.
Okay.
But if that same vendor takes that exact same software, tweaks the marketing language, and calls it an autonomous AI agent, the perceived value just skyrockets. They can suddenly justify charging $8 to $15 per applicant.
Wait, for the exact same thing. That markup equates to almost $500,000 in wasted budget for a typical enterprise processing, say, 50,000 applicants a year, all for a label change.
Yep.
But let me push back here for a second, because we see bloated enterprise software contracts all the time. Isn't this really just a semantics problem? Like, if the HR department has the budget and the software successfully screens the candidates, who cares what they call it?
It matters deeply because mislabeling the architecture alters the entire risk profile of the organization. Let's go back to your off-road vehicle analogy. If you unleash that vehicle, you don't know exactly where it's going to drive.
Right.
Because agents make autonomous, unpredictable decisions. You cannot just let them run wild in your corporate system. You have to watch them constantly to make sure they aren't, driving through the living room.
Ah, okay. So you have to monitor every single move.
Yes, and watching them requires massive infrastructure. The source material points out that organizations implementing true agentic systems see their overhead jump by 40% to 60%.
Oh, wow.
It's all MLOps machine learning operations. You have to build complex governance dashboards, log every single autonomous decision, and constantly check for data drift. A workflow creates a simple audit trail. An agent is a black box. If it autonomously rejects someone, figuring out why requires a massive forensic investigation.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because the cost of that black box isn't just a line item on an IT budget. When HR systems use unpredictable AI instead of clear workflows, the human beings subjected to these systems are the ones who suffer.
They absolutely do.
And that deeply impacts an organization's culture.
It's a phenomenal point. It's rooted in a psychological concept called procedural justice. Basically, people don't evaluate fairness based solely on the final outcome. They care just as much about how that outcome was decided.
They need transparency.
Exactly, which is exactly what workflows provide. If you use a workflow, a rejected candidate can ask for feedback, and the system clearly says you were rejected at step 4 because you have 2 years of experience and this requires 5.
Right. It might be disappointing, but it is logical. You can respect it.
Compare that to an agent, which optimizes for a broad goal. It might evaluate thousands of microscopic data point skills on your resume, phrasing of job titles, real-time market shifts, and just reject you. It just outputs a no.
And to the candidate, that feels entirely capricious. It destroys trust, which leads straight to terrible Glassdoor reviews and ruins the employer brand.
Absolutely.
But this raises a really crucial question. Does the AI actually have to be wrong for people to hate it? Like, what if the agent evaluates those thousands of data points and makes the technically perfect hiring decision?
That is the tragedy of the black box.
Yeah.
The AI doesn't have to be wrong. Research shows that even when an algorithm is 100% substantively correct, the mere perception of opacity makes humans reject it.
Wow.
And if you're a manager listening to this, think about it. Managers hate this opacity just as much as candidates do. Imagine a transparent workflow flags an employee as a retention risk and says, hey, they haven't had a promotion in 3 years and their commute recently doubled.
The manager feels empowered. They have specific data to act on.
Right. But if an inscrutable AI simply drops a notification on the manager's dashboard declaring this employee will quit in 30 days and acts as an unquestionable authority, managers report feeling incredibly anxious. It positions the tech as their boss, not their tool.
Okay, so if true agents bring massive cost overruns, require heavy MLOps overhead, and actively alienate candidates and managers, how do we know when the off-road vehicle is actually worth the headache?
Well, Dr. Westover provides a fantastic 4-question diagnostic tool for exactly this, and it's backed by some incredible real-world case studies.
Awesome, let's go through them. What is question 1?
Question 1. Is the task genuinely complex? The rule of thumb here is if you can write a comprehensive set of if-then rules, you should absolutely build a workflow.
Headcount reporting is the perfect example of that. It's just, pull the data, sort by department, calculate the difference, generate a chart, zero dynamic reasoning required.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if the problem is highly dynamic, where the next step depends entirely on what the previous step uncovered, an agent might be necessary. Salesforce is a great case study here.
Oh, what did they do?
They needed to execute workforce scenario planning, trying to dynamically balance attrition, hiring costs, and seasonal market demand. You cannot then your way through the shifting variables of a global labor market.
Right, there are too many moving parts.
So they tried predetermined workflows, but they were too rigid. They eventually switched to an agentic approach that autonomously weighed those variables in real time. It ended up cutting their planning cycle times by 40%.
Wow, 40%. But what about the cost?
The computational costs were 6 times higher than a workflow. But because the task was genuinely complex and highly strategic, the business value completely justified the cost.
Which introduces the second question perfectly. Does the value justify the cost of execution? The framework suggests if a task costs under 10 cents to execute, you default to workflows.
Yes, and Unilever ran a fascinating natural experiment on this. They custom-built an AI agent specifically for hiring. It cost $8 per candidate to run.
$8 a head.
Yeah, but it could dynamically adjust interview questions on the fly based on the candidate's answers. For their elite graduate programs, where finding the absolute best strategic mind has a massive ROI, spending $8 a candidate was totally fine.
But I'm guessing that logic doesn't scale to everyone.
No, it does not. Because of the sheer volume, they tried using that same $8 agent to hire for high-volume, entry-level retail positions.
Oh no, where you have thousands of applicants for seasonal roles.
Exactly. The costs became astronomical. So Unilever pivoted. They switched the retail hiring over to a structured workflow that only costs 80 cents per candidate.
They cut the cost by 90%, but did the quality of the hires plummet?
Barely moved. The predictive validity, meaning how accurately it predicted success on the job, remained within 3% of the highly expensive agent. They saved millions for a practically invisible difference in quality.
So, what does this all mean? It sounds like using an agent to do basic headcount reporting or high-volume hiring is like using a supercomputer to calculate a restaurant tip. Like, sure, it can do it, but you just spent a fortune to save a second of basic math.
That is exactly what it is, which brings us to the third question. Can the AI reliably handle the hardest, most nuanced parts of the process?
Because if an AI messes up a seasonal retail hire, the stakes are low. But for a VP role, we want the most autonomous brain power possible, right?
Yeah, you would think so, but no. Johnson & Johnson actually piloted an agent to screen candidates for vice president level roles.
And it failed.
Spectacularly. It was
Huh.
perfectly capable of verifying an MBA, sure, but it fundamentally lacked human context.
Yeah.
It systematically undervalued candidates who had taken a risk to become startup founders, viewing them as unstable, while heavily overvaluing people who simply coasted at big corporate brands.
Oh, because evaluating if a failed startup shows strategic agility or a lack of direction requires deep contextual human judgment. You can't automate that nuance.
Exactly. To the AI, it just looked like an employment gap. When an agent fails at one critical juncture of nuance, the whole autonomous process falls apart. For those roles, you must keep a human in the loop, meaning you need a workflow.
Which leads directly to the final diagnostic question. What is the cost of a catastrophic error? We're talking about the blast radius of a mistake.
Right, and IBM had a really smart approach to containing this. They basically segmented their entire HR tech stack by risk.
How did they break it down?
For low-risk stuff, they let the AI agents take the wheel, like meeting scheduling. If an autonomous agent accidentally double books a room, the blast radius is tiny. You just reschedule.
But for high-risk decisions?
Like generating compensation adjustments or promotion recommendations, they strictly enforced workflows with heavy human oversight. Because an algorithm autonomously messing up someone's payroll creates massive legal and reputational damage.
Yeah, if the error is high stakes, you absolutely do not hand over the steering wheel, especially if the agent is autonomous and it might take you months to even notice the error happened.
Precisely.
Okay, so knowing how to evaluate complexity, cost, nuance, and risk is fantastic for a single project. But zooming out to these massive corporations, how do they prevent the everything is an agent vanity projects from creeping back in over time?
The organizations actually succeeding here are doing it through rigorous governance. They are establishing AI architecture review boards. Microsoft has a brilliant approach. They completely reverse the burden of proof.
Oh, what do you mean?
At Microsoft, if an HR leader wants to deploy an agent, the board's default assumption is a hard no. The leader has to conclusively prove to the board why a simple workflow won't work. They have to mathematically justify deviating from the cheaper approach.
I love that. It instantly kills the vanity projects because people can't back up the hype with actual data.
Exactly.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here. AI is evolving at breakneck speed. The models are getting smarter, the costs are plummeting. Won't today's clunky workflow naturally become tomorrow's seamless agent anyway? Why build all this governance?
That is a highly relevant point, and it's exactly why governance cannot be static. Siemens realized this, so they established continuous learning with quarterly review cycles. Every 3 months, they review the capabilities of the models and the token costs.
Right, token costs being the fractions of a cent you pay for every piece of data processed.
Exactly. The economics change constantly, so if an agent gets too computationally expensive, Siemens forcefully downgrades it to a workflow. But, to your point, if a new AI model is released that is drastically cheaper and better, they might upgrade a workflow into an agent. The architecture has to remain fluid.
That makes total sense. And it's not just about adapting to the economics, is it? It's about adapting to the humans actually using the system.
Yes. Unilever ran a second case study that focused heavily on employee voice, and it's a beautiful example of putting that procedural justice concept into action.
What do they do?
When designing their AI assessment systems, they didn't let engineers build it in a vacuum. They ran extensive focus groups with candidates and employees to understand what made them anxious.
And what was the main takeaway?
They found people were actually perfectly fine being assessed by AI, provided two conditions were met. They had to understand the criteria, and they needed to know a human was reviewing the borderline cases.
So they explicitly designed their workflow to include transparency and human review point.
They did. And the result?
Yeah.
They saw a 40% jump in candidate satisfaction compared to their fully autonomous agent design.
Wow. A 40% increase simply by choosing a transparent workflow over a black box. That proves the choice of architecture isn't just about computational efficiency, it's a direct reflection of a company's organizational values.
It really is.
Let's bring this all together. The core takeaway from Dr. Westover's research is undeniable. 80% to 90% of HR use cases are fundamentally better served by cheap, transparent, and tightly governed workflows.
Absolutely.
True, autonomous AI agents should be strictly reserved for those rare, high-value, incredibly complex problems. In a world obsessed with the most expensive tech, having the courage to choose simplicity is your real competitive advantage.
Very well said. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
All right, lay it on me.
We have spent this entire deep dive analyzing how organizations are deploying AI to screen candidates. But we are rapidly entering an era where applicants are deploying their own personal AI agents to mass apply to thousands of jobs simultaneously.
Oh, wow, the applicants are using Aegis to fight the corporate agents.
Precisely. The talent pools are flooding.
Mm.
So the question becomes, will human HR professionals eventually be forced to step back into the loop, not out of a desire for procedural justice, but simply to break an infinite, wildly expensive cycle of corporate bots talking to applicant bots?
That is a wild, terrifying thought to end on. Just an endless loop of automated interviews while the humans watch. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking the hard questions, keep looking past the hype, and we will catch you next time.